Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Karishma Connect. Today I'm speaking to Shanila Roa Al-Qamar about something that we hold so close to us every morning. We spray a little and we feel so confident, so ready to go, so fresh. Each one of us have our own personal taste and love to gift these items as well, and it means a lot and it gives us a lot of confidence. What am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about fragrance and the art of perfumes. Now, I'm speaking to Shanila about her own British brand with an Arabian heritage that she is all set to launch. She's all set to revive Arabian fragrances through the history, through her study, and through her research on perfumes. And it's extremely interesting to know more about something that you use daily but often don't know much about. So go check it out. It's an interesting one. This lady doesn't need questions. She has so much to give, and it's a flowing conversation that I'm sure you'll enjoy. And until the next one, I'll see you soon because this is Karishma Connect. Thank you so much, Shanila, for joining me on this episode of Karishma Connect. It's a pleasure to host you. And I look forward to knowing more about everything that you do and everything that smells great, because a little bit of a hint to the audience of what they are in for on this podcast. To begin with, Shanila, what I do on every episode is I ask people, tell me about your journey, tell me about your vibe, tell me about how you started and what's so special about where you are today.
So my background is fragrances. I've always been interested in fragrances since I was a small child because my mother had the passion as well. So she was very into, she was a fragrance connoisseur, so she loved fragrances a lot. And I grew up with her trying the latest trend back in the 80s. For example, Dior came out with opium, and then that was her signature scent. So now when I smell that fragrance, for instance, it reminds me of my mother, my childhood. So I've always had this passion and love for fragrances because it was something that my mother liked as well. The real thing came to me in terms of my appreciation for fragrances was when I was living in Egypt. So I lived in Egypt for about a year and a half, nearly 2 years. And it wasn't per se the actual fragrances themselves that, really helped me in terms of my journey towards a passion towards fragrances. It's more about going to the souks, going out into the streets, the traditional areas, going to the churches, the synagogues. They have synagogues there as well, the mosques, and they used to burn the bahur a lot there. And that was basically because Egypt, Cairo especially, is a very historical location. It's very much steeped in history. Even today, when you go there, it's not very modernized, and it's very much still within embodies, the essence of its history when you go to Egypt. So that really brought it all to the surface. The smells and the scents of the streets and the souks and everything is very traditional. And I really loved the whole historical aspects of it. And I did a lot of research into it and the story of the Queen of Sheba, for example. She used to supply frankincense. She had trade routes between India, Sri Lanka, through Oman, and then it went up to through the Middle East, the Arabian Gulf, and then went up to the Levant, Palestine, Syria, and all those places as well. And what really fascinated me was the significance of fragrance and scent in traditional, like religious traditions. I'm planning to actually launch my own brand soon, hopefully. But after my experience in Egypt, I went back to London, completed my degree and everything, and then I was recruited. I was headhunted by fragrance brands.
Yeah.
Because I've had so much passion with fragrances as it was, I really wanted to work with lots of, different fragrance brands, especially in the West, European fragrance brands. So I worked for Prada, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, quite a few different fragrance brands as well. Comme des Garçons, Jean Paul Gaultier, Valentino, Christian Louboutin, quite a few different fragrance brands that I used to represent. So I worked in Selfridges initially, which is a huge luxury retail store in London, in Marble Arch. So I worked there for a few years, and then I was transferred by the same company to Harrods. So I was working within the perfumery department within Harrods. In the meantime, sometime I also wrote an ebook about the cultural and historical significance of fragrance in Arabian and Islamic culture and heritage. So I released it as an ebook, and my plan is also to do this in a paperback format as well. And I'm also in the process at the moment of writing a beauty-based book as well. So it's not just fragrances, but it's more connecting to my experience of the historical heritage of fragrance in Egypt. So it's going to be talking about the royalty of the Middle East and Egypt, as well as in Asia, India, and how the royalties of those regions have used scent and as part of their beauty rituals. So going away from the religious rituals is becoming more of a beauty heritage, and how, for example, Cleopatra, she would use fragrances in her beauty rituals and things like that as well. So I'm actually writing this book at the moment, whilst I'm also working on launching a new brand. And I plan to kind of launch it here in Dubai, hopefully, and then into the UK afterwards as well. So in terms of my background, I've worked with lots of fragrance brands as well. And this kind of really kind of instilled the business and the marketing aspect of things when it comes to fragrances. And what was also very interesting for me was to see how Western brands used ingredients and compositions that have been in the Middle East and in Asia for centuries and generations in the past, and how they're reviving this within Western perfumery. So for me, that was quite interesting. And I think what I feel like I want to do is for the Middle East and Asia to kind of claim back that heritage that belongs to them, and kind of like revitalize and bring up, link it back to their own heritage. Because India, for example, and Sri Lanka, they have a really rich and deep heritage when it comes to fragrances, because there's so many stories within religious traditions, where the old prophets would come to Sri Lanka and India, and they came from the heavens with these leaves, and these leaves became the trees and the plants that help to grow plants and trees, which obviously where we get our essential oils from. And these essential oils is where fragrances come into was raised from. So this is actually what I'm really, really interested in. And this is what I've discussed very briefly in my book as well. And I'm planning to launch a brand basically celebrating this kind of heritage and the history of the fragrance as well. So I think the best place to do that would be here in Dubai. So in a nutshell, that's basically my background and what I hope to achieve to do as well. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, building on to what you just told me, what I want to ask you is that you have, of course, studied, you've studied the evolution of smells and the evolution of aromas across traditions. What are some of the unique or peculiar aspects that you have kind of something that people really don't know about and often might overlook? Because for us, for common man, something like a perfume is just like a few whiffs and you don't even know about the history that comes along with it. So, asking because you're very passionate about it and you have done your research, what are some of the things that often people really overlook in terms of perfumery?
I think a lot of people really overlook it, especially in this region, because fragrance has had such a steep history within this region. People tend to forget about the actual origins of it because they're so used to using it on a daily basis. So, for example, the rose note. The rose is very, very well used in this region. Everything is rose-based. You get rose coffee, you get rose tea, you get rose incense, you get lots of different things that are made from roses. And because it's so common and we see it so regular, people forget the actual heritage of the rose, and the fact that there's actually different types of roses. So, for example, today in Saudi Arabia, there's a place called Taif. You've probably heard of it. And this is basically where the Taif rose comes from. It's one of the most expensive types of roses that you can get in the world. And the reason for that is because of the facet of the rose. The scent of the rose is very different and very unique to other types of roses that you can get as well. So other countries that cultivate the rose, which is also very popular, for example, is Bulgarian rose. And in Bulgaria, the kind of facet of the scent is very different to, for example, the Taif rose. So if you get the Taif rose and the Bulgarian rose together, to the common person, they both smell the same. But if you actually sit and you study and you smell, you kind of train your nose when it comes to these two different types of roses, and you will actually start to realize the actual differences when it comes to the facets and the nuances of the notes. The fragrance notes are very, very different and very, very unique. And this basically comes to the surface, how the different soils and the types of cultivation that is used within two different regions, which basically come with an end result of the actual facets and the scent of the actual rose. So a lot of people don't realize this to the common man. They just think, oh, I just want to smell nice today. Let me just spray this.
Exactly.
But then when you put a fragrance on, as you probably noticed, it smells different when you first spray it to at the end of the night. So at the end of the evening, it smells completely different to what it smelled like in the morning. And what you're actually smelling is the matured facet of the fragrance. And then when it's married with other notes and other ingredients, for example, jasmine and cinnamon and vanilla, for example, if you combine the rose with these other ingredients, it obviously, you know, comes up with a different composition. But at the end, when you come to the end of it, those facets come out, and they come out in their own unique way, along with the other ingredients. Their facets come out as well, and it creates a completely unique composition. So, for example, you can have one perfume which has a rose note in it, but the rose is from Bulgaria. The same perfume, exactly the same perfume, would have the rose from Saudi Arabia, from Taif. The end result of that at the end of the evening would probably smell a little bit different because of the cultivation processes that these two different countries go through. So a lot of the common person don't realize that. And this is what's really interesting for me when it comes to the composition of a fragrance note and the smell. Even though on the surface, the common man would not realize this is the case, at the end, you do subconsciously know the difference, because at the end of the day, you think to yourself, hold on a second, this didn't smell the same as when I sprayed it in the morning. So you do actually know, like it's within you, your subconscious, you know that there is a difference. So this is actually what makes the fragrance, and this is why it's so important for perfumers when they're creating the fragrance. Why it's so important to use specific types of ingredients. Why do I need to use a rose from Bulgaria or from Syria instead of a rose from Saudi Arabia? Because it's not just a case of using a rose, it's about what you want to achieve, what kind of fragrance that you want to achieve in the end for the person to wear. So these are the kind of questions that a perfumer is thinking about when they're deciding how to compose a new fragrance, what the end result will be, and how this is perceived by the person that's wearing the perfume as well. So yeah.
And it's also an extension of your personality, right? How much of that
Exactly.
that must inform the kind of smell you're also building on, isn't it?
Absolutely, and this kind of feeds into the concept of marketing as well. So, for example, with luxury fragrances, luxury products, not even just fragrances, there's always a story behind a brand or a label or a product. There's always a story behind it, and it's how a customer, the person who's wearing the perfume, it's all about how they relate to that story and how that story relates to their lifestyle.
Tell me about the story of your brand.
It's basically all about, in a broad sense, about reviving the cultural heritage of the region, Arabia, the traditions and the stories that come behind it, why those traditions came into place in the first place, and what we can celebrate from those. So in a nutshell, the brand that I'm planning to launch will be to celebrate, like each fragrance will have its own story, but then there's an overall story behind a whole line, and that is to celebrate the heritage behind the actual notes and the fragrances that come from it. So, for example, Prophet Adam, he brought some leaves with him. He went to Sri Lanka. He was dropped into Sri Lanka, and those apparently became oud. So the oud that we know today is actually Sri Lanka. So a lot of people don't realize this, and this is the kind of thing that the stories that I want to bring into the fragrance. That this has actually come from Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka potentially was one of the only regions in the whole world where it actually originated from, where the oud nut was originated from. One of them, anyway. So this is the story that I want to bring to life through perfumes. Hopefully, that's my aim in the future when it comes to this perfume brand.
Tell me something, as an insider, as somebody who studied this particular field, what are the three, you're the expert on this, but as a layman, I'd like to ask that what are the three, say, application tips or things to keep in mind when people are looking for that perfume that demands them, that, defines their personality or describes them best?
I think the best thing is to find out your own signature perfume, for example, is to keep testing and testing and testing. And also to understand that there are different types of grades of perfumery. So, for example, again, with my original example of the rose note, there are so many different grades. So, for example, the Thai rose, there's so many different ways for them to create the actual oil. And, there's rose water, there's rose that is steamed, and the way it's made is different. So as a result of that, there's different grades of roses as well. One is the very low end, and then there's the medium end, then there's the high end, and then there's a very, very high end as well. So a lot of people differentiate the differences between these levels is by the pricing of the product. But that's also not very, very important as well. I mean, it is very important in terms of how long it is and the longevity of it. But it's also about why do you plan to wear it? Do you want to wear it at work, or is it a particular function, or is it a wedding or something? You need to know as a layman, I want to buy new fragrance, for example, what is the purpose behind me wearing it? Do I want to accept my personality? Do I want to have a signature scent that I can wear day in, day out? Is it for a particular function? So if you want to wear something on a day-to-day basis, then you're probably looking for something that's more, cost effective, something that you can replenish on a regular basis, but it also has the same effect of being your signature fragrance as well. If you're going to a function, for example, you might want to have the exact same perfume, but you want it to last long, have a more of an impact, assert your personality more. You want to be able to walk into a room and then everyone's looking at you and thinking, what is she wearing? Or what are you wearing? That's basically the impact that you want to think about. What impact do I want to have when I wear a fragrance? So when it comes to that, it's not just about the price of it, it's also the quality of the fragrance as well, the grade of it. So the Thai rose can have many different grades of it, and you need to ask yourself as a layman, what effect do I want to have? What do I want to achieve by wearing this? A lot of people as well, they say, oh, the fragrance doesn't last very long on my skin. Other people can smell it, but I can't smell it. There's lots of different ways that you can circumvent this issue. For example, you can wear a body lotion that is unscented, so unscented moisturizer. You can put on your skin. You spray the fragrance on top of it, and then that would make it last longer as well. So there's lots of tips and little tricks that you can use to, wear fragrances and how you can wear it. You can wear it on certain pulse points, certain parts of your bodies. You can put some fragrance behind your knees as well. If you spray perfume behind your knees, it also has a different effect as well as to how people perceive you when you walk into a room.
Seriously, is there a reason why you put it in those spots? Is there any kind of...
It's projected because basically these parts of the bodies are where your body is the warmest. So behind your ears, people think you should put fragrance behind your ears, but that's the worst place to put it because behind your ears you sweat. So then your sweat will, change the effect of the perfume. And it's not very nice, so it's not very rancid. But if you put it in other parts, for example, where your pulse is, where your heartbeat is close to your heart, it projects differently as well. So this is something also I'll be writing about my book as well, my forthcoming book. But a lot of people don't realize that. So these are quite good tips for people, just laymen who want to, wear fragrances and the kind of fragrances they should wear as well.
That are there any tips for people who are starting out, especially with things as subtle as such, because there are people making soaps, there are people making candles, there are people making perfumes, the organic things. Are there any tips for people, even women for that matter, in the region who are starting out to kind of look out for opportunities or connect with people, especially through these groups? And feel free to even drop in a name or two.
Yes, of course. I mean, I've just recently started, it's very new, it's like a baby at the moment, a female empowerment group. And it's for women who are business women, who are very entrepreneurial. Especially in this day and age, we need to kind of come together in a collaborative mode where we can actually help each other. So, for example, coming back to your questions in regards to tips and how we can come together as people, not just as women, but as people together who have their own businesses, I think you need to look at what your unique selling point is, what message you want to portray through your brand or your product, your service or your image, and what you can offer to the world and to your customer. Um, I think those are the main important things that, as a business person, people should think about and look at as well. And what goods you can offer as well. So for example, with perfumery, for me, what's really important is that people find their signature scent, something that they aspire to, something that they would, that they love as part of their personality, as an extension of their personality, and something that can become like a heirloom that they can pass on to their children and to their grandchildren, and something that becomes like a story that goes through generations. That's a really important selling point for any product, for example. So that's what I would like for my perfumery, the kind of impact that my perfumery I'd like to have on people and their families and their children, as well as the stories that come behind the brand as well. So, I would love for women to come, they're welcome to come onto the platform, because I'd like to share different tips and ideas on a regular basis, which is what I'm doing, especially during Ramadan as well, how women can promote their businesses, different initiatives that they can use to promote their businesses as well, without, competition or, the negative connotations that come with promoting businesses, or the business world, as it were, or the entrepreneurial world.
Yes.
So that is something that I would really recommend, is to look at your unique selling point, what your message is, what your brand is, and what you hope to achieve. Those are the main important things, I think, to think about.
That's lovely. And
Yeah.
on that note, I must thank you for such lovely insights. It's been a pleasure
You're welcome.
speaking to you, and I'm sure it's going to be resourceful.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, and I really enjoyed speaking to you.